My name is Robert, but everyone these days just calls me Grandpa Rob. I wasn't always the old man you see now, with long hair that my children tease me about and a belly that makes it hard to bend down. Once, I was a young man, eager, nervous, and standing on the edge of the real world. That's when I went looking for my first job. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone. You couldn't walk down Main Street without someone tipping their hat or asking about your mother. For a long time, I thought life was simple. School, chores, Sundays at church. But when I turned 18, my father sat me down, his calloused hands folded, and said, "Son, it's time you earn your own bread." The next morning I put on my best shirt, though it wasn't much, just a black sweater that hung loose on me, and tried to smooth down my wild, long hair. My reflection in the window looked more like a boy playing dress-up than a man ready for work, but I told myself it was time. No more hiding behind school books, no more waiting. So I walked into town, heart pounding, scanning every shop front and factory gate. I didn't know who would take me, or if I was good enough. But I knew one thing: I wasn't coming home empty-handed. Finding work wasn't as simple as I thought. I must have knocked on a dozen doors before someone finally gave me a chance. The butcher laughed and said I was too soft. The mechanic shook his head, saying my hair would get caught in the machines. I started to wonder if maybe my father had been wrong. Maybe I wasn't ready. But then I walked into Johnson's General Store. The smell of flour, tobacco, and fresh coffee hit me all at once. Behind the counter was Mr. Johnson himself, a tall man with a mustache that looked like it belonged in a Western movie. He looked me up and down and asked, "You ever worked before, boy?" I swallowed hard and said, "No, sir, but I can learn." Something in my voice must have convinced him, because he nodded and handed me an apron. "Stock the shelves. If you can last a week, you can stay." My heart soared. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't what I dreamed of, but it was a start. My first job. The first week at Johnson's General Store nearly broke me. I thought work was just stocking shelves and sweeping floors, but it was more than that. It was patience, endurance, and learning to swallow my pride. On the very first day, I dropped a crate of canned beans in front of a customer. The crash echoed through the whole shop. Everyone turned, and my face burned redder than the tomatoes rolling across the floor. I expected Johnson to throw me out right there, but he just shook his head and said, "Pick 'em up, boy. Faster next time." The hours stretched like miles. My back ached from lifting, my hands grew raw from carrying boxes, and my feet felt like stone by closing time. I stumbled home in the dark, collapsing into bed without supper. And yet, when I woke the next morning, sore and tired, something inside me stirred. For the first time, I felt like I was building something of my own. There were small victories, too. An old lady thanked me for carrying her flour. A child laughed when I handed him candy from the jar. And one evening, Johnson clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Not bad, boy. You might make a worker out of yourself yet." Those words meant more to me than gold. After the first week, something changed. The store wasn't just a place I worked anymore. It was a place I belonged. I started to learn the rhythm of it, the flow of customers, the way Johnson liked things done. I was no longer just a boy fumbling with crates. I was becoming a worker. I learned how to read the shelves like a clock, knowing when the sugar would run low, when the tobacco tins needed restocking, when the candy jars were almost empty. Johnson taught me how to tally sales in the old cash book, how to spot a dishonest supplier, and even how to greet customers so they felt welcome. At first, I was stiff, mumbling, too shy to look people in the eye. But over time, I found a smile I didn't know I had. I began to talk with the farmers about the weather, tease the children when they counted pennies for candy, and nod politely to the ladies with baskets full of flour. And then came the moment I'll never forget. Payday. Johnson placed a few folded bills into my hand, my very first wages. I stood there staring at them, my long hair falling over my face, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. My hands ached, my back hurt, but that money wasn't just paper. It was proof that I could stand on my own 2 feet. That night, I walked home with my black sweater smelling of dust and coffee beans, my pockets heavier than they had ever been. And for the first time, I felt like a man. Now I sit here, an old man in a black sweater that hangs heavier than it used to, my long hair streaked with silver. My belly has grown with the years, but when I look at my hands, I still see the boy who once fumbled with boxes of canned beans in Johnson's store. That first job didn't make me rich. I never owned a business empire, never had my name printed in papers, but it gave me something far greater, the dignity of work. It taught me that pride isn't found in what you earn, but in how you earn it. Every dollar I've made since, every meal I've put on the table, I trace it back to that general store. I still remember the smell of coffee beans, the sound of the floor creaking beneath customers' boots, the chalk scribbles in Johnson's ledger. I remember the ache in my back after a long day and the relief of collapsing into bed knowing I had given my best. Sometimes my grandchildren laugh at the stories. They say, "Grandpa, that doesn't sound so hard." But I just smile and shake my head. Because work is never just about lifting boxes or stocking shelves. It's about showing up even when you're tired. It's about treating people kindly even when your hands are raw. It's about becoming someone others can count on. And so, when I sit on the porch at sunset, telling them about that first job, I hope they understand. It wasn't just a paycheck. It was the beginning of a life built on sweat, patience, and pride. You don't forget the mistakes of your first job. They stay with you, not to shame you, but to remind you how you learned. One morning, Johnson told me to handle the cash register while he stepped outside. My hand shook as I counted the coins, my long hair falling into my face. The line of customers grew longer, impatient, and I mixed up the change twice. One farmer barked, "Boy, you trying to cheat me?" My cheeks burned. When Johnson returned, I expected him to fire me. Instead, he pulled me aside and said, "Everyone messes up. The only sin is not learning from it." That stuck with me. I started practicing my math at night, scribbling numbers by lamplight until I could count without hesitation. Another time, I stacked jars too high, and one came crashing down, honey spilling across the floor. I spent an hour scrubbing sticky boards while Johnson smirked. "You'll remember not to stack them like that again, won't you?" he said. And I did. Those mistakes felt huge back then. Now I realize they were the bricks of my foundation. Each error, each red face, each sigh of frustration, they built the man I became. There comes a moment when a job stops being just work and becomes pride. For me, it happened the first time someone asked for me by name. It was Mrs. Callahan, a widow who lived on the edge of town. She came in one morning and told Johnson, "Let the boy help me." He carries the bags gentler than you." I laughed, but inside my chest swelled with something I'd never felt before: respect. From then on, people began to notice me. Children waved when they saw me on the street. Farmers nodded when I helped load their supplies. Even Johnson, who never wasted words, started trusting me with more responsibilities. On Saturdays, I'd sweep the wooden porch before opening. The smell of dust and coffee beans mixed in the air, the bell above the door jingling as the first customer entered. I'd catch my reflection in the window, long hair tied back, black sweater dusty, but my eyes steady. For the first time, I liked the man looking back at me. That was the day I realized work isn't just what you do. It's who you become through it. A man never forgets the first time he spends money he's earned with his own hands. It may not seem like much to others, but to me, it was freedom, pride, and proof that I was on my way. I remember clutching those folded bills in my pocket like they were treasure. The paper was warm from my palm, creased from being held too tightly. I walked down Main Street with my long hair falling into my face, black sweater smelling of dust and beans, and I felt taller than ever before. I could have spent it on myself. New shoes, maybe a proper shirt to replace the one I wore thin. But instead, I walked into a bakery. The smell of bread and pies filled the air. Behind the counter was Mrs. Moore, who raised her eyebrows when she saw me. I pointed at the biggest apple pie she had. When she wrapped it and handed it to me, I nearly dropped it, not from clumsiness, but from excitement. I carried it all the way home like a prize. That evening, I set it on the family table. My father looked at me, surprised. My mother smiled, her eyes wet. And as we cut into that pie, I realized something. Work wasn't just about me. It was about giving back to the people who had given me everything. I'm an old man now. My hair has gone gray, my sweater hangs loose over a round belly, and my long hair makes my grandchildren laugh when they call me the rock star grandpa. But behind every wrinkle, every laugh line, every scar, there is the boy who once walked into Johnson's General Store with shaking hands, begging for a chance. I often sit on the porch in the evenings, the wood creaking under my chair, listening to the crickets sing. And as the sun sinks low and the sky turns gold, my mind drifts back to that first job. I see myself again, awkward, clumsy, with long hair falling in my eyes, afraid of being turned away. I see the boy who dropped cans on the floor, who mixed up change, who scrubbed honey from the boards until his knees ached. And yet, I also see the boy who carried bags for widows, who earned his first wages with sore hands, who bought an apple pie not for himself, but for his family. That boy was me, and without him, there would be no man sitting here today. Life has given me many jobs since then, harder ones, bigger ones, with more money and more pressure. But none of them mattered the way that first one did, because it wasn't about the money. It was about becoming someone. I remember my father's face that evening when I brought home the pie. He wasn't a man of many words, but he put his hand on my shoulder, firm, steady. That was his way of saying, "I'm proud of you." My mother's eyes watered as she cut the slices, and when we ate together, it felt like more than dessert. It felt like I had finally stepped into my place in the world. Sometimes my grandchildren roll their eyes when I tell them this story for the 100th time. "Grandpa, it was just a store job," they say, and I laugh, because they're right. But they're also wrong. It was never just a store job. It was the moment I learned that mistakes don't define you. How you rise from them does. It was the moment I learned that pride doesn't come from what you keep, but from what you give. It was the moment I discovered that dignity is not in titles or paychecks, but in showing up day after day and giving your best. And when I look at them, these children who live in a world so different from the one I grew up in, a world of glowing screens and fast cars and endless noise, I hope they hear the truth beneath my story. That work, real work, shapes you, it humbles you, it teaches you patience and gratitude. I tell them, find a job that makes you proud, not just one that fills your pockets. Because money runs out, pride stays. When I close my eyes, I can still hear the little bell above the shop door ringing, smell the coffee beans and tobacco, feel the ache in my back as I swept the porch. These memories aren't grand, they aren't heroic, but they're mine. And they are the foundation of everything I built after. So yes, I'm old now. My hair is long and gray, my belly full, my hands wrinkled. But when I look back, I don't see wasted years. I see a lifetime carved out of sweat, laughter, mistakes, and love. And at the very start of it all, I see that boy in a black sweater walking into a general store and saying, "Please, give me a chance." And to anyone listening now, maybe you're young, maybe you're lost, maybe you don't think you're ready, remember this: you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to know everything. You just need to show up, willing to work, willing to learn. Because one day, when you're my age, you'll see it's not about the job you had. It's about the person you became because of it. And if my story stays with you, if you carry even a small piece of it in your own life, then perhaps I've given back in the only way I still can, with words, with memories, with love,